And we find besides God, we have three major players in this whole story. You've got the sons of God, the daughters of men, and Nephilim. Let's go on and look at the sons of God. Let's start with there. This is the first major player. Sons of God. Where do we hear a phrase like that later on in Scripture? That would fit throughout the Bible. Sons of God. Well, let's take that old term from and let's move ahead again. Jesus, the same conversation, having only this time in Luke 20, he says in verse 36, nor can they die anymore, for they are equal to. And I want to point this out, when it says equal to, if you check the Greek, it doesn't mean as in 1 plus 1 equals 2. It's in that equal to as in, I'm equal to Jim as in we're both elders, we're alike. You know, we have things we're alike, but we're not the same person. So these people are equal to the angels and then described as the sons of God by Jesus himself. The sons of God being sons of the resurrection. Well, let's stop and think. According to Scripture, who is resurrected unto life? Sons of God, the resurrection to life, are those who are in a living relationship with God. Of course, in the New Testament, we understand that the sons of God are those who are in a relationship through Christ. That's a New Testament fulfillment. But there were always sons of God. Sons of God are those in a living relationship with God. This isn't anything new. This has been, you can look at a commentary from 100 years ago and it'll tell you the same thing. Traditionally, as it's understood, even the movie got this right, the children, the descendants of Seth, which were considered those who stayed religious. So those who stayed in a relationship with God were the sons of Seth. And so they are the church people of their time. You get this, when we see sons of God in the story of Noah, we're not talking about any angelic being, but we are talking a godly being. Those people who were in, for that time, a relationship with God. In a relationship with God. And then it says, then they came into the daughters of men. How interesting. It says the sons of God, but really we're not saying sons, we're saying people of God. But, you know, as Hebrew, and we got to remember we're reading from a Hebrew culture, the sons of God, people of God, and then the daughters of men. But why daughters? Well, you know, why does it sons and then this is the daughters? There's two reasons, and once again, as I say, you got to stay into the Hebrew point of view in all of this. As you understand Hebrew culture, it was very male-dominated. So when a marriage was to be made, who made the choice? It was the man. It was the approach of the man. This is very important. So that's the first thing for us to gather. But who were then the daughters of men? Well, in this family lineage that we're looking at, the sons of Seth, the people of Seth were the religious. Well, the people of Cain, we know that he pretty much straight away, they became the ungodly. They became the people that were the secular people, the people that didn't have a use for God. Those people broken in relationship. So you have the religious people, if you want to use that term, the spiritual people, and now you have the secular or the non-religious, the ungodly people. You have both, the daughters of men. Now think about that for a second. The daughters being the ungodly and the man being the godly, and the man makes the choice. What it's telling us is in the free will of the godly people, they chose to mix it up with the ungodly people. That's the big point here. Did you catch that in that first line? They chose to marry the ungodly people. It was the godly people making this choice. That's an important thing to gather in all of this. We have the sons of God. We have the mixed marriage going on. And it says the direct development or the direct children of this are the Nephilim. The Nephilim come from the spiritually mixed marriage. And at first, it can kind of not make sense because as we look at this, as well, they were giants, and it gives the impression, you look at the words, they were men of renown and did mighty things, and they seem almost godlike, but it doesn't fit, because if you read into the next line, it's like, wow, these men of renown and all of this, and then all of a sudden it says, and the world was hopelessly wicked, as if we should have understood from the previous line that this just naturally happened. It wasn't a big, if this was the situation, this happened. But, well, how do we do that? Well, I mean, the Nephilim didn't sound that bad from that line all by themselves. So how did the Hebrew folks, as they read through this, naturally go from the idea of mixed marriage made Nephilim, and then the world was incredibly wicked? Well, it comes down to what the word Nephilim really is. It's a plural, by the way, it means many of them. What if I told you there was Nephilim in our day? What if I told you the world, the United States, was filled with them? Wow. Guess we have to come up with a pretty hard definition then. Which isn't hard, because in the Hebrew it was very straightforward. The word means bully or tyrant, one of reckless ferocity, impious, spreaders of devastation. In other words, here's where we go. When we say giants in the land of Scripture, when the use of this word is not talking about physical stature, it's talking about impact on the world in a negative sense. Impact on the world in a negative sense. If I were to apply that maybe in history, maybe what if I said Genghis Khan maybe could be defined as a Nephilim? He is a giant in history. You can't study history and not learn about Genghis Khan. But what was his overall influence on the world? He's known for the horror and the terror and the suffering. It was a negative impact. We might say Hitler was a Nephilim, or one of the Nephilim, in the way that he is a giant in history. He had obviously an incredible impact on the world, but it was giant in a negative sense. So we have this going on of back to the sin condition. Sin condition makes bad things happen. Sin condition causes bad things to happen. And so let's pop 2,500 years or so back into the New Testament. And once again, here's Paul explaining essentially the characteristic of a Nephilim in what sin is. He says, Galatians 5:20, he uses terms like this: hostilities, fightings, jealousies, angers, rivalries, divisions. All of these things fit into the very definition of what Nephilim is. Bullies, tyrants, spreaders of devastation, people that feed on hostility. It's kind of an interesting thing. I think it came to our forefront, if we were going to use that definition, from Columbine. Just think how things changed in there. Right from there were people who were bullied that maybe they weren't all that balanced in the first place, but these people that were a little more fringe, bullied in the school. And what did the bullies end up doing? They ended up producing the ultimate bully, the giant bully. Because now these guys snapped, and they didn't bully you with words. They came in with guns. And you throw words at them or whatever, and they're throwing back bullets. So it was just a building of the bullies. It was a building of this whole situation. In our present day, kind of interesting, a major study on what causes bullies? What causes Nephilim? What causes them? And in this major study, it breaks down different areas where it says first cultural causes. In a culture that is fascinated with winning, power, and violence, how is Noah's time described? How do we describe our time? Institutional causes for bullies: school, home, or workplaces that do not have high standards for the way people treat each other. How did people treat each other in Noah's time? How do people treat each other in this time? Social issues: the fact that one gets more social recognition for negative behaviors than for positive ones. Think of the last school shooting even that hit the news. Did we see the face of the shooter? Did we hear too much about the children who got shot? You get great recognition if you snap in this culture, don't you? Family issues. Families that are not warm and loving, in which feelings are the feelings are not shared. And the personal history is great. Children who experience social rejection themselves are more likely to, quote, pass it on to others. It's contagious. It's contagious. It gets passed on. So let's say we've got this situation dealing kind of extrapolating from today and the past. You have spiritual people who are in a relationship with God, who actually develop, make lifetime bonds with non-spiritual people, and they have children, and some of these things are going on, and then we end up with these Nephilim to one extent or another. It sure describes Noah's time, doesn't it, as ours. But then what happens when those youth grow up and they have their children? What happens when a culture becomes 50% Genghis Khans? What happens when it becomes 75% Genghis Khans? Or 99.9% Genghis Khans? Can see where this is going. Is it any surprise that as this unfolded, you find this line in the description of Noah? Every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. It was just hopelessly corrupted. It reached a point where there was nothing else that could be thought about. How does that fit with the New Testament? Well, let's pop ahead. Remember this story. Now Noah's a long time in the past. Jesus is on a field trip with the apostles. They went to see the temple. It was great. They were wowed. And they're all looking, and Jesus says, don't be too impressed. They ain't going to be here long. At which point they say, that raises the question. What's it going to be like at the end times? Everybody knew there would be some point where there's an end. And in that description, Jesus has a line that should etch into your heart, into your mind. In Matthew 24:12, he says, and because lawlessness will abound, what happened in Noah's time? Lawlessness abounded. What's happening in the day of Christ? Lawlessness started to abound. What's the story of Revelation? In essence, lawlessness will abound. This will go on. The love of many will grow cold. Isn't that interesting? He's not telling you about bad people or good people. The love of many will go cold. Jesus is saying, in effect, that this whole Nephilim, bullying, tyrant, brutality, evil, sinful nature is contagious in this way, is that there are people out there who might have turned to a spiritual path. They might have had a warm heart. They might have tried to be a better person, but they were overwhelmed by the coldness of the culture. And eventually it just swallowed them up, and they ended up, their hearts grew cold. Their hearts grew cold. What happened in Noah's time? It just perpetuated and perpetuated until evil was continual. Everyone, almost everyone. The past, the dynamic was set up. That's what happens when people who know Christ start sitting on the backside, or they start putting it as a lower priority, and I'm going to marry you because you're pretty, not because you're spiritual. And we compromise, whether it's in marriage or not, other ways, and we start producing a culture of Nephilim. It's still the same dynamic. It hasn't changed at all. So there's a situation. Shows us the past. The past shows you things going on in the present, and it shows you what's going to happen in the future at some time.